In a noisy world, calm looks like wisdom. Strength looks like maturity. Self-control feels like freedom. Many people today are drawn to ideas that promise inner stability, the ability to endure pain quietly, to remain unshaken by circumstances, to depend on no one. There is something admirable in this. No chaos, no excess, no emotional slavery. For people tired of instability, disappointment, or manipulation, the promise of inner strength without dependence sounds not only reasonable, but necessary. Yet beneath that calm surface, a quiet question remains. Is strength meant to stand alone? And is freedom found in needing nothing or in trusting rightly? Before we decide, this idea deserves to be examined carefully, not dismissed, not embraced blindly, but tested. Before we examine any idea, we must remember the rule that governs this channel. We do not begin by assuming an idea is true because it feels helpful, and we do not reject an idea simply because it comes from outside the Bible. We test all things, and we hold fast only to what is good. This includes ancient philosophies, modern movements, and personal disciplines that promise strength or peace. Stoicism presents itself as a path to inner mastery, a way to remain steady without relying on people, emotions, or circumstances. Strength without dependence. The central question, then, is not whether Stoicism sounds wise. It often does. The question is this: does the strength Stoicism offers align with the kind of strength Scripture teaches us to seek? Or does it quietly redefine strength in a way that moves us away from the God we are called to trust? This is the question we will now examine. Stoicism presents itself as a philosophy of inner stability. Its goal is not pleasure, success, or recognition, but freedom from disturbance. At its core, Stoicism teaches that peace comes from controlling one thing alone: your own response. External events are treated as neutral. Pain, loss, praise, and success are all placed outside the self. What matters is not what happens, but how little power those events are allowed to have over you. Dependence is viewed as a weakness. Emotional reliance on people is discouraged. Hope placed in circumstances is seen as foolish. Even strong attachments are treated with caution. The ideal Stoic is calm under pressure, unmoved by praise, undisturbed by loss, self-governed, self-sufficient. For many, this sounds like wisdom, especially in a world marked by instability, betrayal, and noise. Stoicism does not promise happiness. It promises resilience. And it delivers something real: discipline, emotional restraint, clarity under pressure. But before judging this idea as good or harmful, we must ask a deeper question. What is this strength built upon? And who or what does it ultimately trust? That is where biblical examination must begin. Up to this point, Stoicism has been presented on its own terms, its strengths acknowledged, its appeal understood. This matters. Scripture does not call us to misrepresent ideas before examining them. Truth is not defended by distortion. But understanding an idea is not the same as approving it. The Bible does not ask whether a philosophy produces discipline alone. It asks where that discipline is rooted, what it shapes the heart to trust, and who receives glory for the strength it produces. Biblical examination always moves beneath behavior. It asks what governs the inner life, what defines wisdom, and what kind of dependence is being formed. So now the question shifts. Not, does this work? But, what does God say strength is for? And, where does true security come from? With that in mind, we turn to Scripture. not to force it into the discussion, but to let it set the order, direction, and measure of truth. Scripture does not reject strength, but it defines strength differently. The Bible consistently presents true strength as something received, not generated in isolation. The Apostle Paul speaks directly to this when he writes, "And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. Here, strength is not portrayed as self-sufficiency. It is revealed in dependence on God, not despite weakness, but through it. This does not mean passivity. Paul endured hardship, discipline, and suffering, but his stability was rooted in grace, not detachment. Scripture also teaches that the human heart is not designed to stand alone. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Biblical wisdom does not eliminate dependence. It redirects it. We are warned not against reliance itself, but against relying on ourselves as the final source of security. Even emotional restraint is framed differently in Scripture. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. Proverbs 16, verse 32. Self-control is praised, but it is never separated from reverence, trust, and submission to God. From a biblical perspective, strength is not independence from all influence. It is alignment with the one who gives life, wisdom, and endurance. This sets a foundation that looks similar to Stoicism on the surface, but differs profoundly at its core. The tension between Stoicism and Scripture does not begin with discipline. It begins with dependence. Stoicism trains the heart to rely inward, to detach from people, to minimize need, to stand unmoved by anything outside the self. Scripture moves in the opposite direction. The Bible does not treat emotional need as a flaw to be eliminated, but as a reality to be ordered rightly. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. Psalm 118, verse 8. Notice what this verse does not say. It does not say, trust in nothing. It redirects trust, not erases it. Stoicism, however, seeks peace by reducing attachment altogether. Biblical faith seeks peace by anchoring attachment in God. Another conflict appears in how suffering is understood. Stoicism aims to neutralize pain by diminishing its meaning. Scripture never denies pain, it gives it purpose. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Hebrews 12, verse 6. Pain is not merely something to endure silently. It is something God uses to shape, correct, and draw his people closer. When emotional detachment becomes the goal, the heart may become protected, but also closed. Finally, Stoicism treats self-mastery as the highest virtue. Scripture treats humility before God as foundational. Before destruction, the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility. Proverbs 18, verse 12. The conflict is subtle. Stoicism does not shout rebellion, it whispers independence. And that whisper is precisely where discernment is required. When Scripture evaluates ideas, it does not ask first whether they feel stabilizing. It asks whether they lead the heart toward God or away from Him. Biblical discernment uses clear criteria. First, where does the idea place trust? Any teaching that trains the soul to rest finally in itself fails this test. Cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. Jeremiah 17, verse 5. This warning is not limited to trusting other people. It includes trusting one's own inner strength as the final refuge. Second, what does the idea do with weakness? Scripture never treats weakness as something to erase. It treats it as the place where God's work becomes visible. If an idea teaches us to hide weakness, silence need, or eliminate dependence, it conflicts with how God shapes his people. Third, who receives the glory for endurance? If resilience becomes a quiet form of self-exaltation, it no longer aligns with biblical humility. But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. James 4, verse 6. Finally, does the idea soften the heart or harden it? Biblical maturity produces discernment without detachment, self-control without isolation, and peace without emotional withdrawal. These criteria do not immediately condemn Stoicism, but they expose where its foundations must be tested carefully. Scripture does not require us to discard everything simply because it comes from outside the Bible. It requires us to separate what aligns with truth from what quietly reshapes it. From Stoicism, certain practices can be retained, but only when they are reordered under biblical authority. The discipline of self-control has clear biblical value. The ability to pause before reacting, to resist impulsive emotion, to endure discomfort without complaint. These traits echo biblical exhortations toward sobriety and restraint. Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. Mental discipline, when directed toward hope in God, is not foreign to Scripture. What must not be retained is the goal of emotional self-sufficiency. Biblical self-control is never an attempt to need nothing. It is the ability to respond rightly while depending fully on God. Likewise, endurance can be retained, but not as emotional detachment. Scripture calls believers to endure, while remaining tender-hearted. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another. Romans chapter 12, verse 10. Stoic calm without love becomes indifference. Biblical endurance without love becomes impossible. What remains useful, then, is not Stoicism as a system, but certain disciplines, filtered, reordered, and humbled under Scripture. Biblical discernment is not complete until truth is lived, not merely understood. Scripture gives order to practice. First, train self-control without denying dependence. Resist impulsive reactions, but do not silence prayer, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Self-control governs responses. Dependence directs the heart. Second, endure difficulty without emotional withdrawal. Suffering is not something to neutralize, but something to walk through with God. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. Peace does not come from detachment. It comes from attention fixed on God. Third, practice inner calm without rejecting relationship. Scripture does not form isolated individuals, but a body. Bear the one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Strength in Scripture includes allowing others to help carry weight. Fourth, measure strength by faithfulness, not emotional hardness. Endurance is proven not by how little you feel, but by how steadily you obey. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2. Biblical practice reshapes discipline into devotion and resilience into trust. Strength is not measured only by composure, and peace is not proven by emotional distance. Scripture never calls us to feel nothing. It calls us to trust rightly. Stoicism reminds us that discipline matters. The Bible reminds us that dependence matters more. When ideas promise stability, they must be tested, not by how calm they make us feel, but by where they train the heart to rest. The call of Scripture is neither emotional chaos nor emotional armor. It is steadfast trust in God, lived out through obedience, humility, and love. So we return to the instruction that governs everything on this channel. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. Not everything that sounds wise is to be embraced. Not everything that comes from outside Scripture is to be rejected. What remains is what leads us closer to God, not further into ourselves. This is the strength that endures.